All right, so we're diving into a pretty unique request this time.
Yeah, this one's going to be interesting.
We're going to try to compare, Edmund Kemper, a real-life serial killer, with Dexter Morgan.
Okay.
Dexter Morgan, of course. Fictional blood spatter analyst.
Right.
But also moonlighting as a vigilante killer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a fascinating challenge because we're not just looking at, their crimes, but also how pop culture kind of portrays violence in a way that almost sanitizes the real-life horror.
Yeah, for sure.
So our source material for this deep dive is an analysis that really delves into the lives of both Kemper and Dexter.
Oh.
What we're going to do is, uncover that psychology, right? That separates like a real monster from a fictional one.
Yeah.
And maybe see how like our fascination with true crime like speaks to something deeper within us.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think the first thing that really jumps out when you look at Kemper's childhood is the just relentless psychological abuse that he suffered at the hands of his mother.
Really? Just horrific.
The details are, I mean, they're disturbing, right?
Yeah.
She would deliberately create these moments of hope, right?
Yeah.
Like she'd give him affection 1 minute and then just completely withdraw it the next.
Yeah, that's classic.
And I think that's what makes it so insidious.
Absolutely.
It's a classic manipulation tactic, right?
Yeah.
By constantly shifting between, affection and rejection, she kept him emotionally off balance.
Yeah.
And like teaching him that love was a weapon to be used against him.
Yeah, that's exactly what was happening.
You mentioned manipulation. I think it's important for our listeners to understand what that really means in this context.
Okay, so manipulation, right, in its simplest form, is just about using underhanded tactics to control someone's emotions, their behavior for your own benefit.
Right.
In Kemper's case, his mother used manipulation to just maintain power and dominance over him.
And that created a toxic environment that had a profound impact on his development.
And then there's this, truly chilling incident from his childhood.
Oh, yeah.
He killed and dissected his cat.
Yeah.
When I first read that, I have to admit, I just thought,
okay,
typical, creepy kid behavior.
Right.
But I'm guessing there's more to it?
Oh, much more to it.
Okay.
So experts believe this act goes way beyond just simple cruelty.
Okay.
It suggests a detached curiosity about death, almost like a need to understand its mechanics.
Yeah.
Some even speculate that it represents a desire to dissect the source of his pain.
Oh, wow.
His mother, in a symbolic way.
That's a really disturbing connection.
Yeah, for sure.
So we have all this going on, and where is his father in all this?
Yeah, so sadly, he was largely absent.
Okay.
Both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
He basically became a silent enabler of the abuse, which just reinforced the sense of powerlessness that Kemper felt.
You can imagine how that lack of a positive male role model would just contribute to his warped view of relationships and control.
Now, Dexter also experienced trauma, right?
Right.
He witnessed his mother's brutal murder at a young age. However, that seems very different.
It is, yeah.
From the sustained, calculated cruelty that Kemper endured.
Yeah.
How does that difference in trauma kind of play out?
Yeah, it's a crucial distinction, right? So prolonged abuse like Kemper's can fundamentally reshape a personality in a way that a single event, even one as horrific as Dexter's, might not. When abuse becomes the norm, it can warp your entire understanding of the world, your sense of self, your ability to form healthy attachments.
So while Dexter's trauma gave rise to his dark passenger, Kemper's abuse was almost like a slow poison, like seeping into his soul.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Yeah.
And as Kemper entered adolescence, the seeds of his brutality really began to take root.
His physical appearance was intimidating. I mean, by 15, he was already over 6 feet tall.
Wow.
You would think that might have given him confidence.
Yeah, you would think.
But instead, it seems to have further isolated him.
Yeah, that's the irony, right? Instead of finding acceptance or camaraderie, his size made him stand out in a way that made it harder to connect with his peers.
Yeah.
His social awkwardness, his inability to form meaningful bonds just intensified his feelings of rage and resentment.
And those feelings eventually exploded in a horrifying way.
Yeah.
He murdered his grandparents when he was only 15.
Oh, wow.
This wasn't just a random act of violence either, right? Right. I mean, the level of planning involved is terrifying.
It really is, yeah.
He didn't just snap, right?
No.
He chose his moment, acquired a weapon, and carried out the murders methodically.
Yeah, it's chilling.
This chilling level of premeditation demonstrates a disturbingly detached and calculating mind, even at such a young age. It was almost like a macabre experiment.
Yeah.
Like a testing ground for the darkness that would later consume him.
Totally.
This is where we see a sharp contrast with Dexter.
Okay.
While his dark passenger urges him to kill, he's bound by the code of Harry, instilled by his adoptive father.
Yeah.
This code gives him a framework, a set of rules to channel his urges.
Exactly. Yeah, Dexter's violence, as disturbing as it is controlled and directed.
Right.
Kemper, on the other hand, lacked any such moral compass.
Yeah.
There were no boundaries, no rules to constrain the darkness within him.
So Kemper ends up in a mental institution.
Right.
Atascadero.
Atascadero, yeah.
Which ironically becomes a twisted finishing school from him.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, instead of being rehabilitated, he used his time in Atascadero to study the staff, learn their routines, exploit their weaknesses. He wasn't just a patient, he was a student of manipulation.
Yes, honing his ability to blend in and deceive.
And then in a move that seems completely baffling now, the system releases him back into his mother's care.
That was a catastrophic decision.
Yeah.
Just fueled by a fundamental misunderstanding of his psychological state.
Right.
The authorities failed to grasp the depth of his manipulation and the danger he posed.
Yeah.
They essentially set the stage for his future crimes.
To cover his tracks, he gets a job with the highway patrol.
Yeah.
Which, in retrospect, seems almost too perfect.
It was, it was the ultimate disguise.
Right.
Gave him credibility, access to information, a way to move freely without arousing suspicion.
Right. Hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
Using his position of authority to further his dark agenda.
Exactly.
And he was incredibly charismatic.
Yeah.
Able to charm his way into people's lives.
Yeah. I think of it less as charm.
Okay.
And more like a calculated tactic.
Okay.
Kemper was a master manipulator, able to shift between affability and menace in an instant.
Right.
He used his charisma like a weapon, disarming potential victims, evading detection.
And this is where I think the comparison to Dexter gets really interesting.
Okay.
Both of them wore these masks of normalcy, but their motivations were completely different.
Yeah, Dexter's normalcy was about survival.
Okay.
He had to blend in to avoid being caught.
Right.
Kemper, on the other hand, used his carefully crafted persona to lure victims closer.
Yeah.
Playing this deadly game of cat and mouse.
And sadly, this is where we have to confront the horrific reality of Kemper's killing spree.
Yeah, his victims weren't random.
Right.
Each one represented a distorted image of his mother, a manifestation of his unresolved trauma.
And the brutality of his crimes is almost beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
The dismemberment, the necrophilia, it all speaks to a level of rage and a need for control that's just chilling.
So the details of his crimes are incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
He would often decapitate his victims and bury their heads facing his mother's house.
Oh my God.
What do you think that says about his psychological state?
It's like a twisted form of revenge.
Uh-huh.
You know? He was forcing her to confront the consequences of her abuse in the most horrific way imaginable.
You're right.
Yeah.
It was a symbolic act designed to exert ultimate control.
Right.
To negate the humanity of his victims, assert his dominance over them, and ultimately over his mother.
And this is where we see the starkest contrast, I think, between Kemper and Dexter.
Yeah.
Dexter's killings, while ritualistic, are always controlled.
Right.
He leaves no trace, and he operates within a twisted, code of justice.
Right. Kemper, on the other hand, was driven by pure rage and resentment.
Right.
His violence was chaotic, deeply personal, and fueled by a lifetime of psychological torment.
Yeah.
It was about destruction, not justice.
And ultimately, that rage culminated in, I think, the most horrific act imaginable.
Yeah.
The murder of his own mother. It was as if he believed that by killing the source of his pain, he could finally find peace.
Right.
But as we'll see, even that act didn't bring him the resolution he craved.
And then something unexpected happened. He confessed.
But was it genuine remorse?
Right.
Or was it a final act of manipulation?
Yeah.
A way to control the narrative and ensure that he remained the center of attention.
Right.
That's a question we'll explore further as we delve deeper into his psychology.
So we have Edmund Kemper, a real-life monster, driven by a lifetime of abuse and a desire for ultimate control.
Right.
And then we have Dexter Morgan, a fictional construct, grappling with his inner darkness while adhering to this, twisted moral code.
Yeah, two very different individuals, shaped by vastly different forces, yet both capable of unspeakable acts.
And the question that lingers is, what can we learn from comparing these two figures? How can understanding the real-life horror of Edmund Kemper change how we view fictional characters like Dexter?
Those are the questions that we'll tackle as we continue our deep dive.
Yeah.
It's going to get uncomfortable.
Yeah, no.
But it's also going to be incredibly insightful, so stay tuned.
We're back. And I have to say, the idea that Kemper might have confessed as like a final act of manipulation is really unsettling.
Yeah.
It makes you question like everything you think you know about him.
And that's the thing about Kemper, even behind bars.
Yeah.
He continued to exert control. He became a sort of celebrity inmate. He relished the attention from researchers, journalists, even other inmates, using his notoriety to manipulate and control those around him.
That's a terrifying thought.
Yeah.
That some individuals are so driven by a need for power that even imprisonment can't fully contain them.
Right.
It makes you wonder if true rehabilitation is even possible in cases like his.
Yeah, it's a complex question. And there are no easy answers.
Right.
But it does raise a crucial point about the limitations of the criminal justice system.
Right.
How do you deal with someone like Kemper, whose desire for control and notoriety seems to just supersede any possibility of remorse or change?
And this is where I think the contrast with Dexter becomes particularly thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Dexter, while, a killer, operates within this self-imposed moral code, targeting those he deems deserving of punishment.
That's the thing about Dexter. He occupies this moral gray area that forces us to confront our own biases. He's a vigilante taking the law into his own hands, but his victims are all criminals who have escaped justice. It makes you question, is there ever a justification for taking justice into your own hands? Where do we draw the line?
It's easy to get caught up in the fictional world of Dexter and grapple with those moral dilemmas. But Kemper's case really brings us back to this stark reality. There are real monsters out there. And their motivations are often far more complex and disturbing than any fictional narrative.
Exactly. Kemper's crimes weren't about some twisted sense of justice. They were rooted in deep-seated psychological trauma, fueled by rage, resentment, and a desperate need to exert control over others. It's a chilling reminder that evil can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives.
And yet, as unsettling as it is, we're drawn to these stories, both real and fictional. Why do you think we have this fascination with true crime and shows like Dexter? What does that say about us?
It's a primal curiosity, I think. We're fascinated by the extremes of human behavior, by the dark side of human nature. Like peering into the abyss, trying to understand what makes people capable of such horrific acts. Maybe it's a way to reassure ourselves that we're different, that we could never do such things.
Or maybe it's a way to confront like our own shadow selves.
Maybe.
Our own capacity for darkness. By exploring the motivations of killers, both real and fictional. Perhaps we're trying to make sense of the violence that exists within us all.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's also the element of catharsis, wouldn't you say? In a world where justice often feels elusive, seeing a fictional character like Dexter mete out punishment can be strangely satisfying. It allows us to vicariously experience a sense of control and retribution that we might not find in real life.
But the problem is that real-life violence doesn't offer that kind of neat resolution.
No, it doesn't.
Kemper's crimes left behind a trail of devastation, shattered families, and a haunting reminder of the fragility of life.
And that's the danger of romanticizing violence in fiction. It can desensitize us to the real-world consequences, making it easier to distance ourselves from the pain and suffering that real victims endure.
So while Dexter might challenge our notions of morality and justice in like a fictional context, Kemper throws the whole moral compass out the window. His crimes force us to confront the uncomfortable reality that evil doesn't always have a neat explanation. And that sometimes the monsters are all too real.
It's a sobering thought, but there's another layer to Kemper's legacy.
Okay.
One that's both unexpected and significant.
Okay.
He inadvertently contributed to the development of criminal profiling.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
By studying his crimes and his psychology, law enforcement was able to gain valuable insights into the minds of serial killers.
In a way, he became an unwilling teacher, providing a glimpse into the dark world of criminal behavior and helping investigators understand the patterns, motivations, and psychological triggers that drive such acts.
Right.
It's a strange paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
His horrific acts actually contributed to solving other crimes and preventing future tragedies.
So on the one hand, we have the devastating consequences of Kemper's crimes, the shattered lives, and the enduring trauma.
And on the other, we have this unintended legacy, contribution to the field of criminal profiling that has undoubtedly helped to save lives.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of places, there can be unexpected glimmers of light.
Yeah.
And that the pursuit of knowledge and understanding can sometimes emerge from the most unlikely of sources.
And that brings us back to the heart of this deep dive.
Right.
We're comparing Edmund Kemper, a real-life monster, to Dexter Morgan, a fictional one.
Right.
We've seen how their backgrounds, their motivations, and the nature of their crimes differ dramatically.
Right.
What have we learned by dissecting these two figures?
Yeah.
And what does it say about our fascination with stories of violence and darkness?
Yeah.
For me, the biggest takeaway is the importance of recognizing the line between entertainment and reality.
Right.
Dexter might make us question morality and justice in a safe, fictional space.
Right.
But Kemper throws the whole moral compass out the window.
Right. He reminds us that evil exists in the real world.
Yes.
And it could be messy, chaotic, and utterly devoid of the neat resolutions we often see in fiction.
And yet we are drawn to both of these figures in different ways.
Yeah.
Dexter allows us to explore the gray areas of morality, while Kemper forces us to confront the darkest recesses of human nature.
So the question is, what does this fascination tell us about ourselves?
Yeah.
Are we drawn to darkness because it allows us to confront our own shadow selves from a safe distance?
Possibly.
Or are we seeking something else entirely? A deeper understanding of the human condition, even in its most disturbing manifestations?
It's a question worth pondering.
Yeah.
And as we move into the final part of this deep dive, I think it's important to consider how this exploration of real and fictional killers can inform our understanding of the world around us.
Right.
And perhaps even inspire us to create a safer and more compassionate society.
You know, it's fascinating how we can be like simultaneously repulsed and captivated by figures like Kemper. He represents, you know, the darkest impulses of humanity. Yet we can't seem to look away.
It's like a train wreck, isn't it?
Yeah.
We know it's horrific, but we can't help but stare.
Yeah.
Part of it, I think, is a need to make sense of the senseless.
Right.
We want to know, like, what drives someone to commit such atrocities.
Right.
Maybe to reassure ourselves that we're different.
But as we've discussed, you know, understanding the real-life horror of a case like Kemper's should absolutely impact how we view fictional characters like Dexter.
It should make us more critical.
Right.
More aware of the ways in which entertainment can distort our perceptions of reality.
Yeah.
Dexter, with his code and his calculated approach, almost makes killing seem palatable.
Yeah.
Kemper shatters that illusion.
Dexter might make us question our own moral boundaries, like in a theoretical sense. But Kemper throws the whole concept of morality out the window.
Exactly.
His crimes were driven by pure primal rage.
It's not some misguided sense of justice.
And that's the danger of romanticizing violence in fiction.
Right.
It can lead us to believe that there are always, like, neat explanations, clear motivations.
Right.
But real life is rarely so tidy.
It also makes you think about our fascination with true crime as a whole. Are we drawn to these stories because they allow us to explore our own shadow selves from a safe distance?
There's definitely an element of that.
Yeah.
I think we all have a morbid curiosity about the darker aspects of human nature. True crime allows us to engage with that darkness without actually having to confront it in our own lives.
It's like a controlled experiment in fear and fascination.
Right.
We get to experience the adrenaline rush of danger without actually being in harm's way.
And for some, there's also an element of wish fulfillment.
Okay.
In a world where justice often feels elusive.
Right.
Seeing criminals brought to justice, even in a fictional setting, can be satisfying.
Dexter taps into that, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. He becomes this, like, avenging angel, punishing those who've escaped the law.
Right.
It's a fantasy of control in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
But as we've seen with Kemper, real-life violence doesn't offer that kind of neat resolution.
Right.
It leaves behind scars, trauma, and a haunting reminder of the fragility of life.
So how do we reconcile our fascination with true crime and fictional killers with the very real harm that violence inflicts?
I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
We need to be mindful of the media we consume and its potential impact on our perceptions of the world.
Right.
It's important to remember that entertainment is not reality,
right,
and that fictional portrayals of violence can often sanitize or glamorize something that is inherently horrific.
Yeah.
It's also about recognizing the humanity of the victims. It's easy to get caught up in the psychology of the killer,
right,
but we must never forget that real people were hurt, real lives were lost. And finally, I think it's about having open and honest conversations about the complexities of violence.
Right.
We need to talk about the root causes, the warning signs, and the ways in which we can create a society that is less tolerant of violence in all its forms.
So to our listeners, we leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
As you continue to explore the world of true crime and fictional thrillers, remember to do so with a critical eye, an empathetic heart, and a commitment to understanding the complex realities that lie beneath the surface of entertainment.
Because the line between fascination and desensitization can be thin.
Yeah.
And it's up to each of us to navigate that line with awareness and responsibility.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Make sure to subscribe and like this video for more stories that will keep you awake at night. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a tale of terror.